Before 1789, European society was locked in place. The Ancien Regime operated on a static system of overlapping feudal laws, where monarchs held unchecked authority and the Catholic Church dictated civil life from birth to death. By the late 18th century, France was buckling under the weight of this structure. An insurmountable financial crisis, driven by heavy debts and compounded by severe crop failures, left the state bankrupt and the population starving. Desperate to balance the royal ledger, King Louis XVI summoned the Estates General in May 1789, convening the assembly for the first time in over a century and a half. The move immediately backfired. Frustrated by their lack of voting power, representatives of the commoners abandoned the proceedings, formed their own national assembly, and demanded a written constitution. What began as a procedural attempt to fix a domestic budget deficit ended by dismantling the entire logic of absolute monarchy. The newly formed National Assembly wasted no time drafting the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. They took theoretical Enlightenment ideas, universal equality, secular governance, and national sovereignty, and they codified them into actionable law. The physical space where they debated these laws permanently rewired our political vocabulary. Reformers gathered on the left side of the assembly president, while conservatives grouped on the right, establishing the modern political spectrum of left versus right. These concepts horrified neighboring monarchies. Declaring that power belonged to the public rather than a divinely appointed king was a lethal threat to the established order. Yet at this exact moment, the chaos was entirely contained within the borders of France. This localized political experiment in Paris would eventually break containment, cross oceans, and systematically replace the legal and administrative frameworks of the globe. The ideas exported themselves through military conquest. Napoleon Bonaparte's armies swept across the continent, acting as the primary vehicle for revolutionary ideology across European borders. The Napoleonic Code acted as the standardized legal framework for these territories. It dismantled the Spanish Inquisition, feudal guilds, and established equality under the law. It also centralized secular power, stripping ecclesiastical courts of the authority they wielded over family life. The process was brutal. The harsh, extractive nature of French military occupation forced occupied populations to band together against their new administrators. In Spain and Germany, this resistance forged the first expressions of modern nationalism. Napoleon's military empire eventually collapsed, but the bureaucratic framework he installed remained. The legal standards he enforced stayed active, modernizing European governance long after his defeat. Across the Atlantic, France controlled Saint-Domingue. It was the most lucrative colony in the world, generating massive wealth entirely through enslaved labor. In 1794, the radicalized French Republic issued a decree abolishing slavery. This legal shift directly inspired local leaders like Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines to escalate the massive slave revolt already underway on the island. The formerly enslaved population defeated British and Spanish and French military forces. In 1804, they established Haiti, the only nation in history born from a successful slave revolt, and the Second Republic in the Americas. The shockwave ricocheted back to Europe. In 1808, Napoleon invaded Spain and deposed King Ferdinand VII. This removal of the monarch created a massive political power vacuum in Spain's colonies. Local Creole elites in South and Central America, who had been studying French liberal philosophy, seized the opportunity. Figures like Simón Bolívar used the absence of royal authority to launch the Latin American Wars of Independence. Internal European conflicts provided the Western Hemisphere with both the ideological inspiration and the tactical opportunity required to achieve permanent anti-colonial independence. As geopolitical borders shifted, the rapid acceleration of the revolution's violence, specifically the thousands of executions during the Reign of Terror, altered human thought. Observing this top-down radical social engineering prompted thinkers like Edmund Burke to formulate modern conservative political thought. He advocated for cautious, organic societal growth as a direct response to the era's instability. In parallel, the collapse of the French monarchy inspired the Romantic movement. Poets like Wordsworth and Shelley initially celebrated the destruction of the old rules, viewing the upheaval as a moment of total human rebirth. This division in Paris established the competing ideological frameworks we still use to interpret the world today. Looking at the global state a few decades later reveals a fractured Spanish empire, a broken European feudal system, and the permanent presence of human rights in political discourse. Modern reality still reflects these shifts. We categorize our politicians into left and right, we navigate property laws in secular courts, and we recognize sovereign republics across the Americas. The French Revolution serves as a distinct dividing line in history. It was a violent demolition of the pre-modern world that physically cleared the path for the modern structures of global society to be built.